podcast. Your host, Dr. KellyRae, is a renowned mindset coach and counselor, often referred to as the inner critic tamer. With a passion for guiding individuals through life's challenges, she specializes in personal growth and emotional healing. In each episode, Dr. KellyRae shares invaluable insights, practical strategies, and relatable stories designed to inspire you to take that first step toward positive change. So, grab your favorite beverage, settle in, and get ready to dive deep into meaningful conversations that empower you on your journey. Let's welcome Dr. KellyRae.
Hey there, welcome back to the Getting to the Week podcast. I'm your host, Dr. KellyRae, and I'm so glad that you decided to stop by and spend some time with me today. As I do each week, I ask a question, and this week's question is, have you ever worked really hard to heal, to grow, and to change, only to find yourself feeling unexpectedly sad? Not because something bad happened, not because life fell apart, not because you made the wrong decision, but because something inside you realized you weren't the same person anymore. And I know that sounds really kind of weird and crazy, right? But stick with me here. I think one of the things we don't talk about enough in the personal growth arena is grief when we're growing. Not grief after loss, but grief during transformation. Because while everyone talks about becoming a new version of yourself, very few people talk about what it feels like to outgrow an old one. And honestly, I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. Not because they aren't growing, but because growth often asks us to let go of identities, beliefs, roles, and survival strategies that had once helped us make it through very difficult seasons of our life. So wherever you are in the world today, grab your cup of coffee, settle in, and let's get this conversation going. I think many people expect healing to feel exciting, liberating, empowering. And quite often it does, but sometimes growth feels surprisingly emotional. Because growth often involves letting go. Letting go of old patterns, old coping mechanisms, old identities, old ways of relating to yourself and others. And for a long while, that previous version of yourself kept you safe. Lately, I've found myself noticing things I would have ignored years ago. A calendar that felt too full, a conversation that leaves me drained. Excuse me. A commitment that feels heavier than it used to. And while part of me is grateful for that awareness, another part of me realizes something else. That old version of me would have kept going. Excuse me. She would have pushed through. She would have overridden her own needs. She would have explained away the exhaustion. You know, the I'm fine all the time. And once you start noticing your patterns, your exhaustion, your people-pleasing, your over-functioning, your tendency to carry more than you share, you begin seeing things you used to miss. And often that's when my clients ask a very human question. Why did I do this to myself for so long? What I've learned is that this question usually comes from the part of us that's finally awake, looking back at the part that was simply trying to survive. And that's where we often begin talking about what I call Trudy, your inner critic, shadow side, protector, whatever name you give that part of yourself. Mine happens to be called Trudy. Because most people assume healing means getting rid of those parts, silencing them, quote unquote, fixing them, firing them. But that's not the work that I do. I help people understand what those parts have been trying to communicate all along. And when people begin understanding the language underneath those patterns, everything starts to shift. Because what they're often afraid of discovering isn't that those parts are bad. It's that a part of them has been carrying responsibility for so long that it no longer knows who it is without the job. And honestly, that can feel both scary and sad. Because even when those old patterns are exhausting, they were often created for a reason. At one point, they helped you survive. I think one of the strangest parts of growth is realizing you can miss versions of yourself that you're no longer meant to be. I think sometimes we assume that if we're leaving something behind, we shouldn't miss it. But that's not always true. You can miss the certainty that came along with people pleasing. You can miss the identity of being the strong one. You can miss being needed. You can miss being the fixer, even when those roles were exhausting. Because familiar is comfortable. Even when familiar wasn't healthy. I think many people experience this and assume they're moving backwards. And maybe they're not moving backwards at all. Maybe they're simply grieving what no longer fits. It's something I've seen countless times in my work. People assume they're regressing because they miss an old version of themselves. But often what they're actually experiencing is grief. They're not losing themselves, they're letting go of an identity that was built for survival. Those of you who have listened to recent episodes know I've been talking about a part of myself named Trudy. For a long time, Trudy believed her job was to protect everyone, to handle everything, to manage everything, to prepare everything. And honestly, she was really good at it. The problem is that what helped us survive isn't always what helps us thrive. In Trudy's mind, this was deeply concerning. She wasn't hearing, "Oh, I got a promotion." She was hearing security budget cuts. Meanwhile, the Rottweiler, who's Trudy's imagined head of security, had already begun updating his resume and researching retirement communities. Lately, I've been imagining something that makes me laugh. It's almost like Trudy thinks she's getting fired. Like the adult KellyRae is walking into the office saying, thank you for your years of service. And Trudy immediately packing up her desk, crossing her arms, calling HR, preparing a formal complaint. But that's not what's happening at all. She's not being fired. She is actually being promoted. She's moving from crisis management into advisory services. And I think that's what healing often looks like. Not getting rid of parts of yourself, but changing the jobs they were never meant to hold forever. Because eventually, the emergency ends. An example of this might be no longer seeing everything as a red flag. Because that's very much how Trudy operates. In her world, safety means identifying every possible threat before it has a chance to hurt anyone. She's the one blocking all of the entrances and exits, sealing the windows, triple checking the locks, and monitoring the security cameras 24/7, 365. And while that level of vigilance may have made sense at a point in her life, it can also make it difficult to recognize when something is simply unfamiliar rather than dangerous. Not every uncomfortable feeling is a warning. Not every uncertainty is a threat. And not every person who walks into your life is there to hurt you. I think one reason growth can feel uncomfortable is because familiar patterns are incredibly tempting. When life feels uncertain, many of us instinctively reach for what we've always done. Overfunction, overgive, overexplain, overcommit, overcarry. Not because those things feel good, because they're familiar. And familiar often feels safer than change, even when change is healthy. I've noticed this in my own life. There are moments when I can feel myself wanting to slip back into old habits. Not because they're working, but because they're known. And honestly, I think that's a normal part of growth. The goal isn't to never feel tempted to go backward. The goal is learning to recognize what's happening when you do. What I've come to realize is that healing isn't about rejecting who you've been. It's about appreciating those versions of yourself while recognizing they don't have to run the show forever. The people pleaser was trying to create safety. The perfectionist was trying to prevent mistakes. The overachiever was trying to earn worth. The protector was trying to keep you from getting hurt. They weren't villains. They were survival strategies. And maybe growth isn't about fighting those parts. Maybe it's about thanking them, learning from them, and gently helping them step into a new role. So today I want to leave you with a question. Is there a version of yourself you're grieving right now? The strong one, the caretaker, the fixer, the person who always held everything together. The version of you who did whatever they had to do to survive. If so, maybe that grief doesn't mean you're moving backwards. Maybe it means you're honoring how far you've come. Because growth isn't only about becoming someone new. It's also about recognizing and appreciating the person who carried you all that time. And maybe healing isn't saying goodbye to those parts forever. Maybe it's simply saying, you don't have to carry all of this by yourself anymore. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Getting Through the Week. Until next time, take care of yourself, be kind to yourself, and remember, you can only honor who you were while still making room for who you are becoming. Until next week, I send you so much
Thank
love.
you for joining us for another episode of the Getting Through the Week podcast with Dr. KellyRae. If you're looking to connect with her or schedule an appointment, here's how you can reach her. Follow her on Instagram at AskDrKellyRae. Check out her Facebook page at Dr. KellyRae. Find her on TikTok at Dr. KellyRae. Visit her website at drkellyrae.com. Or send her an email at drkellyrae@gmail.com. Until next week, Dr. KellyRae sends you so much love.